Mark Carney has 3 passports: Canada, United Kingdom, Ireland. A globalist with options. He hasn't seen Canada in a decade. Calls himself a European, not a Canadian.
As a European, I am a European, actually.
Oh, you are?
I'm a citizen.
Told U.S. Congress last year he's a Brit. He's back to lord over you. Canada's not his home. It's his throne.
What the polls are showing us is not so much the collapse of the Conservative vote. The Conservative vote has remained pretty constant, pretty steady in like the high 30s to maybe even 40%. And that's where the Conservatives and Pierre Poilievre have been in the polls for the last like 16 to 18 months. I think they hit a peak of like 42, 43% in December, like the height of Justin Trudeau's unpopularity. But that was never going to hold for an election. What has really happened is the complete and utter collapse of the NDP. The NDP has gone from polling, 15 to 20% consistently over the last several years, down to single digits, down to some polls have them getting as low as 0 seats. Like there's a possibility that the NDP will be completely wiped out in this election. The left is consolidating their vote around Mark Carney. So all of the people who have typically split the vote between these two parties, and maybe there's 2 different profiles of an NDP voter and a Liberal voter, they both basically abandoned this idea of having a third left-wing party, the NDP, and saying, no, we're all going to put our support behind Mark Carney. This is supported even like man-on-the-street interviews that we've done for Juno, where a reporter will go to one of these elbows up rallies and interview them. And a lot of the people are traditional, like social democrats, left-wingers, younger, very like urban environmentalist types, like the Champagne socialist types. And they basically say, I'm a lifelong NDP voter, but I'm voting for Mark Carney because I believe that we have to stop Pierre Poilievre. We don't want to have a conservative in Ottawa and Donald Trump. And that's the motivating factor. So it doesn't matter how well Pierre Poilievre performs, how much he knocks it out of the park, how strong he is, how big his rallies are, right? It's hard to circle the square, right? Because you look at Mark Carney, his campaign launched in Nepean over the weekend, and I think he had 40 people in the room. Yeah. I think someone counted there was like 45 or 47 people in the room, whereas Pierre Poilievre is having these like historic rallies with 5,000, 6,000 people. There's a lot of excitement around Pierre Poilievre. He's kind of an exciting character on the political right. I don't think that conservatives have had a leader like him, maybe in my lifetime. And he's charismatic. He's young. He connects with young voters. He's an incredible communicator. Like he communicates better than like any podcaster, any YouTuber. Like he understands the message and he can communicate it so well. And I would say the same thing on economics. Like I've interviewed Pierre Poilievre, and him explaining like monetary theory and inflation better than like anyone at a think tank or anyone in an economics department. So he's like a once in a lifetime guy. He's the real deal. And yet, because of this confluence of all these outside factors, I fear that it's just like history is working against him, unfortunately.
Wow. Yeah. So didn't even Tom Mulcair, former leader of the NDP and a leader of the opposition party at one point say to, NDPers, listen, people, you got to vote Liberal. Didn't he say that recently? Or?
Yeah, he said that there's no reason to vote for the NDP anymore. And I don't think there's a lot of love lost between him and the current leader, Jagmeet Singh. But Jagmeet Singh has done an incredible disservice to Canadians. And I think he deserves like every ounce of what's coming his way, right? Like he had so many opportunities over the last 4 years to defeat the government, to vote them down. And that is what Canadians wanted, right? But he was always in it for himself. He was always trying to strike a deal to maintain his own political power. I think he misread the situation, Shawn, because say he had triggered an election back in October, or like there was a by-election that the Conservatives wanted downtown Toronto, right? Like the strongest of the strongholds for the Liberal Party, and a Conservative won it. That I think that was in the summer of 2023. If they had called an election anytime between then and December, I actually think it would have been the Liberals that would have been wiped out. I think that the voting public is so angry at Justin Trudeau and the way that his policies have destroyed our country in so many ways. We can get into any of that later. But in so many ways, Justin Trudeau has destroyed Canada. And voters are so angry about that they would have taken their frustration out at Justin Trudeau And Jagmeet Singh could have found himself as the true balance of power, the leader of the opposition, a person who has a lot of power. They even have an official residence in Ottawa. But because Jagmeet Singh was a coward and he preferred to just prop up the Liberals, there's a lot of speculation that he was waiting for his pension. His pension finally kicked in a couple of weeks ago. And so now he's guaranteed that sort of golden parachute on his way out. He waited for that for personal reasons, and he's the one that's going to get punished. The brunt of the anger that Canadians have over the things that have been done to our country, well, it wasn't Mark Carney's fault because he wasn't really there. The only person left from that coalition is Jagmeet Singh. Now, I wish that Canadians would still take it out on the Liberals. I wish that they would say, look, it's still the same gang, right? It's Katie Telford and Gerald Butts behind the scene advising. It's Chrystia Freeland and Stéphane Guilbeault and Bill Blair and Mendocino and just, LeBlanc, all these characters are still the ones that are going to be running the government. It's just that the guy at the very top is going to be Mark Carney rather than Justin Trudeau. I wish that Canadians would take it out on the Liberal Party, but I don't see it happening that way.
Yeah. And that was actually where I was going to go. I'm glad that you mentioned that the party is still substantively the same. However, there's also the argument that, well, we've got a new leader, and so really we should stop talking about a lost decade and start saying, well, how does Pierre Poilievre stack up against Mark Carney, which is kind of tough to do with Mark Carney taking all the best and most popular ideas of Poilievre. Is that fair to say that we should just move on from the lost decade? Or do you think there's some runway and some value to really doubling down and saying, no, we need to convince you that Mark Carney is just simply Liberal Party 2.0. He's just another Justin Trudeau.
Well, I think that has been the strategy in trying to call Mark Carney just like the next version of Justin Trudeau. It's hard though, because they're quite different people, right? The thing about Justin Trudeau was that he sort of rose to prominence based on his fame and his family's name and his family's accomplishment, not so much his own. I think Canadians believed in like the hope of Justin Trudeau, the promise of Justin Trudeau, and they bought into a lot of his sort of aspirational ideas. Obviously, that hasn't turned out very well. But, Justin Trudeau was an unserious person. He didn't have any kind of a resume to become prime minister, right? He was a drama teacher and a whitewater rafting instructor, and he liked to wear blackface a lot. That's pretty much all there is to know about young Justin Trudeau. Whereas Mark Carney is the opposite, right? Mark Carney is clearly a very intelligent person. He has gone through some of the most prestigious institutions in the world, Harvard, Oxford, although we did just learn that he plagiarized his PhD at Oxford, allegedly. So, maybe he's been borrowing other people's ideas all along, but still, he rose through the bureaucracy, became the governor of the Bank of Canada, got picked up to be the governor of the Bank of England, which I don't think has ever happened for there to be a foreigner in that role, but obviously very well regarded and successful even in his private life. The thing that I'm worried about is that even though he seems like a moderate, like the picture of Mark Carney as this sort of steady hand and a central banker and more of a bureaucrat in his demeanor, the more you look into him, the more you study who he is as a man and what his views are, you realize that he's also a radical ideologue in so many different areas and departments. You can talk about his 2021 book, Values, where he's really obsessed with the idea of net zero. Like that is everything to him in terms of business. Like all of his business dealings, all of his investments, they all kind of circled around this idea of environmental and social goods and this idea that, we have to phase ourselves off of oil and gas. So when I think of what Canada needs to recover, I agree that we've had a lost decade. And I would even say it's deeper than that and worse than that. Like I think Canada is in deep, deep trouble as a country. I don't think that we lived up to the ideal of what Canada could have been, right? Like if you think about after the Second World War, Canada came back with like a great deal of pride and accomplishment over some of the military battles and achievements that we gained. And, it was this super hopeful time for a new future. And I think if Canada had been really serious about wanting to be a great country and rich country, there were things that we could have done back then, right up to like building our own sovereign wealth fund. Like we could be richer than the United Arab Emirates. We could be a bigger, better financial powerhouse than like Singapore or Hong Kong. But we didn't, right? We developed through social democracy, the first Trudeau, Justin's father, Pierre Trudeau, really implemented like a brand of socialism that I think has been like weighing and tugging us down. And like when you think about like what the major problems are, it's like, it's not, you can't just like snap your fingers and say, let's like apply some free market tactics here and there and hopefully fix it. Like, how do you solve like 3 levels of government with like massive bureaucracy and busybody bureaucrats with rules that will prevent the kind of growth that we need to recover, right? It's like there's no clear path, there's no clear idea of like how that would work. So I think whoever becomes prime minister has their work cut out for them. I'm not very optimistic that Mark Carney has even identified the right direction to go in, right? I still think he's going to go in the same direction as Justin Trudeau with regards to making our economy even less competitive, imposing even more regulations and barriers that will prevent us from reaching the kind of economic promise of Canada.